Welcome to the latest episode of the Claus Corner. Today's guest is a music aficionado with an encyclopedic knowledge in many genres of music. He was also the host for the long-running radio show, ARG! I look forward to talking music, movies, and everything else he's been up to since I first met him 35 years ago. So without further ado, please welcome the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Tom Gatzen to the Claus Corner. Tom, how the hell are you?
I'm doing great. I had a good weekend with Halloween. My favorite time of the year. I'm pretty sure that's your favorite time of the year too. Um,
Yes, it is.
and a couple things I did this year differently. One of my soundtracks that I love to listen to, and I usually pick one for the Halloweens, and this year's was the soundtrack to Mandy. Have you seen that film?
No, but you know what's funny, and you're gonna laugh at this because I mean, you, as I mentioned in the intro, you and I have known each other for 35 years. I love all genres of music. My last concert was Barry Manilow at Radio City Music Hall. So
And
that's
there's nothing wrong with that because there's a couple songs back in the 70s that I enjoyed. The other thing, real quick, I want to show you what this Halloween, the Halloween board game.
oh my God, where'd you get that?
I got this off of you know, that store that sells basically everything, Amazon.
Oh, is that
And
something
here's the
new?
funny part about it. Here's the funny part about it. I pre-ordered it, or I ordered it in May thinking it was out and it was a pre-order. They didn't tell me. And it actually showed up on Halloween Day. So it's kind of funny. However, I open it up and the instructions are you got to have a degree, I think. So what I did was what any normal person would do was go on YouTube and look for an instructional video. When I watched a couple of those, got an idea how to play it. So one of the things later on tonight, uh, I'm going to play it with my family. But it looks pretty cool on the YouTube videos. But and Halloween, is probably I don't know if you consider Jaws horror, but if Jaws and Halloween, Halloween's my favorite horror film ever. So, and I know a lot of people watching this will probably agree. And even one of the videos I was watching, it was this married couple, and he was going over it, and she was actually getting like scared playing the game. It's like it's a board, but I mean, you if you remember how scary the movie was, and it brings back those memories. And of course, what's the film now? Almost 40, 47 years old, maybe.
Yeah, it came out in 1978. I know that. So I don't, whatever that was. So 45, something like that, 46 years ago.
Uh,
But it's been a while.
so, something around there. So anyhow, so that's how my weekend was with the past few days. So it was pretty cool.
Well, I had
But
something
uh,
similar to Halloween. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just want to say because I didn't have the board game, but I went to Super Mega Fest. I go to different movie conventions. I love Chiller. I just came from there. I got some really good interviews. And speaking of John Carpenter, I'm going to be interviewing on November 20th Alan Howarth, who did all the music with John Carpenter for all the John Carpenter movies: Halloween, Halloween 2, season, Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, They Live, The Thing. So I cannot wait to talk to him about that. But at the Mega Fest, I met somebody. He goes, "Man, you're a really cool guy. He does Halloween fan made movies." And he goes, "You want to be in it?" So I just finished filming, and it came out Halloween night. You can look it up on YouTube. It's called American Halloween 3. Right now, it's got, I think, in 2 days, 5 or 6 thousand views. And the last one, Halloween 2, his Halloween 2 had 41,000. So it was just fun to be in. I'm not going to be walking the red carpet and not winning any Oscars, but it was a lot of fun though. And you are correct. Halloween is definitely my all-time favorite holiday. And Halloween, the original, John Carpenter, is one of my all-time favorite horror movies. So I have a question for you. Let's stay with that for a second because did you
sure.
see, I like Rob Zombie, but I do not like his version of Halloween. What's your opinion?
Um, Out of all the franchises, I guess that's the proper word for it,
Yeah.
where you had the John Carpenter ones, then you had the I think 4 and 5. I don't think those were done by Carpenter. I think the first three were, right, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken.
Yeah.
Um, so the one and two, one obviously is legendary. Two was, okay, cool. They did give you a sort of an ending. Then three had nothing to do with the Michael Myers, the the masks where they put the masks on and
Yeah.
the
3
Happy
more
Happy
days to
Halloween song comes on
Halloween,
TV.
Halloween.
Um, then the ones after that without Jamie Lee, they were fun, but it's not something I go out of my way to be like, oh, I gotta watch these in concession. Uh, then the H2O movie came out, which featured Jamie Lee back in the fold, and that was pretty cool. It sort of gave closure again,
Yeah.
after the second one, and then the one after that where he's resurrected and they have like the webcams.
Yeah.
Thought it was terrible, absolutely terrible. Um, and then I think the Rob Zombie films came. Um, Rob Zombie sort of puts more of in my opinion, a filthier kind of spin on it.
Mhm.
His movies, House of a Thousand Corpses, and that whole trilogy that he did with that, it was very filthy and more down to earth, or more reality of what could happen. I think. Um, I I only watched the zombie movies maybe once or twice, and you know, I I like the people he has in his movies.
Yeah.
I love Forsyth; he's great. Um, and Danny, what's his name? The guy who plays the janitor. I forget his name. He's in Trio
Oh, Trejo. I met him,
Trejo.
Danny Trejo. He plays Machete. Yeah. Well, in
Um,
other movies he played. Yeah, that guy's great. I met him at Rock and Shack. Such a. I said I usually get pictures where they're joking me. I didn't even have to say. I said, "Hey, could you do me a favor? Can you get a picture of me?" He grabs my throat and really starts joking me, and he's laughing. The guy is hilarious. But yeah, I agree with
um,
you. He has a lot of great people. I think what he does, he loves to go back to the movies of the '70s, which I love, and they were a little bit more grittier, a little bit more nasty. But the thing that I didn't like, and I want to hear what you have to say about this, is I love John Carpenter with simplicity. Less is more. He's the boogeyman. You can't kill him, and that's it. With Rob Zombie, oh, he had a bad childhood. I don't give a fuck about his childhood. I just wanted him to kill people.
well, I wasn't a huge fan of those movies. It's something that if I got nothing else to watch, all right, maybe I'll watch them again. Um, However, I think you and I, when we were growing up, uh, that's when the Halloween movie came out.
Hmm.
So I kind of wonder if we were growing up when the zombie ones came out and we watched those first, how we would feel about the original. Would it have ruined the original for us, or would we watch the original and be like, wow, this really makes the zombie movies look like garbage?
Yeah,
Um, so it's hard to say when you're getting in that mindset. Great example. I just watched Speak No Evil with James McAvoy.
that was a great
Have you
movie.
have you seen it
I saw that, and I saw the original. Ah, you're frozen.
yet?
Yeah,
Hello,
you're
I
just
lost
froze
you.
up. So I couldn't miss what you said. When
You're
I saw the original, and I saw
hi, yeah.
the.
I'm having internet problems.
All right, you're back up now.
All right. So I think can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you and see you
Oh, all
perfectly.
right. So we're good. All right. So I had watched the original
Me too.
last year, I think.
Hmm.
And when I watched the US version, I guess it
Yeah.
really left a sour taste in my mouth because the way they, I mean, there's some similar scenes, don't get me wrong, but the whole storyline was not even close to how it ended up in the original. And to me, the original was very creepy. It was a
Yes.
very creepy movie. It was a very creepy thing. I'm not going to talk about how it goes because some of the watchers or listeners might have not have seen it and they plan on it. So I was very disappointed. I love McAvoy in the Split series, um, but it just they didn't stick with the original. And I get they want to do something different, but the way they ended it, yeah, it didn't catch me. Um, so I guess my answer to the Rob Zombie thing is I can take him or leave him.
Yeah.
He likes the blood and gore aspect, I think, whereas Carpenter is more of the scare factor.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, but cool. All right.
Yeah.
So,
Well, wait, Liz, I want to talk
anyways,
about that for a second because I want to give you an example, my own example of what happened, what you said, like if you were born during that time. I went recently during COVID, Sylvester Stallone re-released Rocky 4 and he redid a lot of it. So I saw it in the theaters again. When I was talking to the guy who rips the tickets, it was a young kid. I said, "What's your favorite Rocky?" He goes, "Creed." I said, "Creed? That's not even a Rocky." He goes, "Well, that's the one I grew up with." So that's very similar to, no, I grew up with, Rocky, Rocky 2 with Mickey and Paulie. Those are to me Rockies. Creed is like a cheap spinoff. I enjoyed it, but he grew up with that. He doesn't really, he goes back and probably thinks the old ones are cheesy, which I love. So that, but I want to talk about that movie without giving anything away. Speak no evil. I was very disappointed, just like you were too. I didn't expect the original ending because I realized that other countries aren't afraid to leave on a more reality-based note where it could happen. And another example is I think it was called The Vanishing. If people didn't see this movie by now, I don't really care because it came out so long ago. In the original version, his wife is missing. He finds her dead in the trunk. In the American version with Kiefer Sutherland, she's missing. He opens up the trunk. She's alive, and they live happily ever after. And it's like I think people are so afraid to American audiences can't take the harsh reality endings. And I think that's one of the reasons why they sort of flip flopped that movie.
One of the things we'll probably get to is, and you made a good point about when it's released over here as whereas when it was a foreign film. I think you're right with the other countries aren't afraid to have a shock value or to
Yeah.
be obscure and be more realistic. Um, you take the original Speak No Evil and how I was mentioning earlier, how very creepy that movie was and very creepy ending to where this movie is completely opposite.
Mhm.
I mean, if you went to the theater and saw the original and you're walking out that theater and you're like, what the fuck? You watch the one with McAvoy and you're like, yeah, I love the way that happened,
Yeah.
and it's completely on the other end of the spectrum on both those movies and the reaction you get as a viewer. So, and like I was saying earlier, and that actually happens with music too. And we can get to that later
Yeah.
when certain records come out overseas and then the same album comes over here.
Yeah.
um you're going to get different artwork sometimes because for some reason over here it's taboo, but anywhere else in the world it's fine. So,
Yeah.
but we can
American.
get to that later when we start talking about music and
All right.
stuff.
Well, we're gonna get to that, but yeah, I'll give you one last example because I thought this was hilarious. Did you ever see Stephen King's The Mist? It's the movie, not
I
the.
did.
All right. So when I was buying a ticket to go see it, people were walking out. What the fuck? You fucking believe what? I mean, they were. I'm not. I'm saying it verbatim. They were swearing. They were so pissed off. I'm like, what is this about? And then I went into the movie, and I actually stood up and cheered. I said, "This is the best ending of any movie." I loved it, and even Stephen King goes, "Yeah, that movie was even a little too dark for me because in the book." His short story ends where they're just driving through the mist and all the monsters are still alive and they don't know it never ends. But the movie took it to a conclusion, and I love that ending. But so many people, and I think for the reason for Speak No Evil why they did that, they made it a feel good movie. Americans for some reason just love everything nice and clean, tidy, walking away into the sunset hand in hand. They can't take an ending that, like, well, maybe the protagonist actually dies in this, or maybe the kid doesn't live. So that, and I love when movies take that turn. And John Carr, I just did. Do you know James, or have you ever heard of the show Love on the Spectrum? It's a
i
Netflix show.
I've heard of it. I don't think I've seen it.
All right. Well, it's a show, and I hate reality shows with a passion. But there's one show, and these kids with autism, and I met this kid from that show at one of the conventions, and he's done 3 shows already. And the last show we did was yesterday, and we reviewed Halloween 3: Season of the Witch. I was doing my research on that, and they said that the ending of that when he's on the phone, like trying to get all the networks, the 3 networks, to take off the commercial. And it ends with like no, 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 and the reason is the studio said we don't like the ending. It's too down. But John Carpenter had final say, and his friend Tommy Lee Wallace, who edited the first Halloween, directed that movie. He goes, "Tommy, do whatever the hell you want. I don't care." So they went with that ending, and unfortunately, the movie bombed. But now it's a cult classic. So sometimes, if it bombs initially, Give it about good 25, 30 years, people will come around and start to like it.
I like the third one. I
I
love the
love it.
soundtrack to it. Here's my music guy coming out again. I love Carpenter's soundtracks. I think that movie was very enjoyable as far as the soundtrack goes. It was done really well to fit the scenes, and I don't know actors' names as much as you do, but the cop in it, he was in Night of the Creeps. I love that guy.
Tom Atkins.
Yeah, I
He's
love
he's
that
the
guy. I
best.
think he was in a Lethal Weapon movie too.
He's been in many, many, many. You know what I love about him is that like he's in a lot of John Carpenter movies. He was in Escape from New York. He was in The Fog. Every movie within 3 seconds he's getting the girl. Like I don't know if you remember, but there's one scene and I was rewatching it again. I was laughing my ass off. They're like, the father or the her father in the first scene is rushed to the hospital. He dies. So the daughter comes and they go to find out what's going on in Santa Mara, which is where the Silver Shamrock Master are being made. First thing she goes, so where do you want to sleep? Well, that's a dumb question. Next thing you know, they're over there having sex. I said, Tom's the man. And then in The Fog, Jamie Lee Curtis is a hitchhiker. He picks her up within 30 seconds. Those two are in a hotel room. So yeah, Tom Atkins is hilarious. Every movie
I
he's like,
forgot he was in The Fog. That's right.
yeah. So
So
no, he was great, and then also was I can't remember, can't pronounce his last name, but he's an Oscar-winning actor. He played Cochran, the antagonist. I can't remember his last name, but he was a really good actor. I was just watching the movie MacArthur, and he played Franklin D. Roosevelt. The guy's been in tons of movies, but I agree with you. And that's why at the convention, Alan Howarth was there, who did the music with John Carpenter. He was the first one I went up to. I said, I need to have you on my show. And I emailed him within 10 minutes. He goes, let's do it. So I'm very excited to talk about that because I love his sound. And if you saw my Adrienne Barbeau interview, I don't know if you remember, we were talking about how she goes, yeah, because they have a son, Cody, together, Cody Carpenter, and
yeah.
they're doing the music. And she goes, I thought it was gonna be so boring. And I actually went there. It was fantastic. I loved it. I said, I know. I wanted to go. He was in Boston doing it, and I missed it. He plays the music, he and his son, and the movie's playing on in the background. I would love that because it's so airy.
Well, and I believe Cody and John reworked some of the Halloween music, and they actually put out some music reworking some of the old scores. I think that the series is called Lost Themes or something like that. I off the top of my head, I can't remember, but I know Cody has been involved with, his father doing some remixes and re-recordings of some of the old film music.
I've been trying to get him on the show, but his Adrian was telling me that he lives in Japan. She goes, "I'll forward the email to him." So I'm trying to get him on the show because I would love to talk to him about that. And because you said, like you said, it's got that airy. You know what it is? It's we talked about John Carpenter with the way he makes movies, with the music too. Its simplicity was what makes it so great. It's just like it's sort of like Jaws, dun 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 dun, but it's so effective. In those movies, you have a little synthesizer, and when you're watching a movie, it makes the movie so much better.
Oh, and as I was saying earlier about the Halloween Rob Zombie compared to his, where Rob Zombie went for gore and
Yeah,
Carpenter went for the scare factor. And if I remember correctly, they didn't use any fake blood in the original Halloween movie. It was all done with cameras and music and sound effects,
yeah.
which, in my opinion, that's the way to make a horror movie. The original 12 Ghosts movie, it was all sound. That's what was scary about it was the soundtrack. And
Mhm.
I love that about music and films. And it's just, you know, the remake of that, you saw people getting cut and stuff like that. They didn't need to do that in the original, which I'm not sure what year it was, maybe the 50s or the 60s. It was black and white, and it was, I remember watching it, and the music made the film creepy. So
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever seen the original of that one.
I have, and I loved it, and I agree with you completely. And that's what I always tell people that because I love classical music as well, and I go to these see symphonies and things like that. And people are like, "Oh my God, that's so boring." I said, "Watch any movie without music and tell me how boring music is because you're not crying because of the movie. You're crying because of you're not laugh or you're not scared because of the movie. You're scared because of the music. The movie or the music is what gives the movie life." So I agree with you a thousand
Well,
percent.
Well, since we're talking about it, we might as well go right into it. One of the things that I was going to discuss was film music, and I I think your average listener doesn't really. I don't want to say the word appreciate, but uh, maybe use it as a focal point of the film. Now, Rich, you tell me, you put on a Roadrunner cartoon and you just have the volume up with no picture. That is some fantastic classical music going on. The
Yes.
composer's name is Carl Stalling, whom I absolutely am a huge fan.
Hmm.
Um, and it's just, when people will watch a film and at the end credits when the score is playing at the end,
Oh yeah.
I love sitting down and actually wanting to hear the piece, because when you go see a film, and if it's a powerful film or something that really moved you, you want to feel that piece go through you to see if it makes it even a different experience for you. Um, so it's huge. A huge part of my life is film music, and of course, I'm a huge Morricone fan.
Oh my God,
Um,
yes. Did you see that documentary? I tried watching it, but it wasn't in English.
Not yet. I didn't know there was one.
Yeah, it came out maybe about a year ago, and there's a great theater in Stamford called the Avon Theater where they play independent movies, foreign movies, and I missed it there. It was only playing for, but I went to the streaming services. I want to say Amazon Prime, and it wasn't in English, and for some reason I could not get subtitles on it. So I don't know if I could find it elsewhere. But I am a huge fan of his, and for people who don't know, watch Quentin Tarantino's. I think it was called The Hateful Eight. He used Morricone's music from John Carpenter's The Thing for that
I
movie.
have seen that film, and and it was a great film. Um, so one of the things too is when you there's a film that's out, there's the soundtrack and then there's the score.
Yes.
And um some people don't understand the difference. So I remember somebody one time, and I worked in a record store for many, many years. I don't know if you mentioned that in your intro to me. I know we talked about the DJing thing.
We're going to get to all of this if
Uh,
we have time. Because
when Titanic was huge, people would come in asking for the Titanic soundtrack.
yes.
If they didn't ask for it and they just went to the section and they just grabbed what looked like the Titanic, they would take it home. And if they bought the score by accident because they didn't look at the CD to see that it was the score, they're like, well, hey, this Celine Dion song ain't on my CD. What is this? And it's, well, that's the score. Well, that's the music to the film. Where's the song? I said, no, that's the soundtrack.
Yeah.
It's the score. The symphony music is the score music. Um, so and I'm not trying to say that to poke fun at people. One of the reasons I disc jockeyed for so many years is to get people to learn and basically if people were not aware of certain things like how I'm talking about now, between the score and the soundtrack. I One of the things that I love doing is if somebody learns something from me, when it has to do with music and arts or whatever,
Hmm.
I feel that I've done my accomplishment for that day. And DJing for so many years, um, I don't know what questions you have for me later on, but I'll just say this. One of my goals when I was DJing is if I affected one listener during that 2 hour slot,
Hmm.
then I've done my job. Now I can go into examples later on, during the interview of how that did come apart or come to be. Um, so I'm not sure if I'm getting off track of where you want to go. So if you want to fire away and you tell me.
No, no, but well, what I like about this is that this is one of the few interviews where I don't even have anything prepared. I'm just loving, I'm having a great conversation with you. So I've known you for so long. I don't need to have questions written down. But before
All
we'll
right.
talk about that next. But what I want to talk about is I love uh, classical music and I love the soundtracks. And what got me into classical music was actually John Williams, because when my brothers and I were little, I would get the Jaws soundtrack. My brother would get Close Encounters. My other brother would get Star Wars. Then we'd all pass it around and play them all. So I grew up buying John Barry, The Deep, all these different soundtracks, and I still listen to the movie soundtracks now. I can stream it. But I think that there's a great documentary that everybody should check out. Who's if anybody's interested in what we're talking about, it's called Score, and it's all about different composers going from John Williams all the way to Trent Reznor, and they talk about how they composed the movie. And what impressed me so much, I can't remember which composer it was, but he said that they had the movie ready and they actually had the billboard up saying the movie's coming out, and the guy doesn't even have the music ready. He's like, "Oh my god, what the hell am I gonna do?" He goes, "I wish they hired John Williams." He was making a joke about it, but they show like John Williams. They had clips of him in '77 doing Star Wars. And they do like 5 or 10 minutes at a time. And you go through, come back, all right, and then let's try this. Go back another 15 minutes, try this, and then you put it all together. And it's amazing that they're looking at a screen with nothing there, and then it just comes to life. They've shown like how he did ET and the bike, and like you said, you watch it and there's nothing there. Then the music comes on and it just comes to life. And I agree with you about Bugs Bunny because there was there's so much. I saw a documentary on not the composers of that, but the illustrators, the people that did all the drawings, and then of course they mentioned Mel Blanc who did all the voices or most of the voices. But the music, yeah, there's that's another thing that helped me get into classical music and appreciate it for what it is. While I'm having fun
And
watching a roadrunner get killed.
and imagine a composer having to write the score for a Roadrunner cartoon. Um, I mean, it's not an easy job. I mean, it's got to take hours and hours and hours and hours just for probably like a minute or 2 minutes worth of music for the 3 or 4 minute cartoon or whatever how long they were. And that to me, that is just amazing just to think about. And
Yeah.
then listening to it to what they created and hearing, where these guys went with their minds and what they were going to use for like, when the coyote, fumbles the roadrunner's, beak or whatever, it's like the blah, 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 and that's all done by classical music instruments, classical instruments. Um, so yeah, I mean it's I think scores to film or even shorts or TV series,
Hmm.
documentaries, any genre you want to film. I think scores are very overlooked by the masses. And part of what I like to do is when I'm DJing or if I'm talking to somebody, if they have an interest, if they don't have the interest, it doesn't make a fun time, but if they have the interest, and then they hear you, and if they learn something from you, to me that's rewarding. um and I do that to this day with people around me. I don't DJ anymore. And I'll get to that later on. But when I was doing it, it was like, I had fun with it. It was my main thing when DJing was, it was my 2 hours away from the rest of the world.
Hmm.
I had fun doing it. People would hear what was in my mind that day, basically by what records I would play. Um, and I didn't have to worry about having to play anything. I played what I wanted.
Yeah.
And that was the beauty of college radio. Was that when I went in and started doing it, I had free reign to play whatever I want. Minus profanity words, and if I was on late, I could play a disclaimer. Um, so and that to me was enjoyable. And I did have feedback over the 25 years ranging from people
Wow.
in Rhode Island to Germany.
Wow.
So of course the Germany thing didn't happen until the radio station would stream
Yeah.
live on the air. um it's kind of funny because I missed a couple months during one year, and this one guy, I don't remember where he was from, was another country, and he was emailing the station manager, where's ARG? How come it's not on anymore? I get my new music from the show. Where is it? And the general manager, forwarded me the email, and he wanted me to respond.
I love it.
And I responded, look, I have a small hiatus going on, but I'll be back on here, blah, blah, blah. And there is a website that I do have some older shows archived on a website called archive.org. And these were in the, ranging from the year 2005 to 2008, 2009. Um, and then eventually the radio station archived it themselves. But the thing with that is, if it was archived on a radio station, it would delete after 2 weeks.
Mhm.
So, um, it kind of sucked, but I mean, you could download it and save it, but you only had a 2 week span to do it. So
Yeah. Well, I have to say, then people that are watching this in Connecticut will love what we're going to talk about next because for me and you, my two favorite places in our area were Brass City Records and Phoenix Records, which was formerly Cheapskate Records. And every Saturday, for me anyway, even before I met you, I started going. Every Saturday I'd go like when it was on Bank Street, go to Phoenix, then go to Brass City Records, and then after a while, when I met you, we used to go to Rhymes Records in New Haven every week with Kevin Lewis. So, but
yeah, yeah.
I do have to say, and what you talked about with because I have very eclectic taste. I want to give you an example of that. I was in radio for a while. I went to Connecticut School of Broadcasting, and one of the AM stations I worked at during the week they just became simulcast. So I had the board tech, which was not fun, but then the weekend I had my own show. But so come bring a book and just board tech, and then on the weekend I'd have my show. So my program director says, "You have the most eclectic taste." I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "You brought a biography on Mozart. You're wearing a Clockwork Orange T-shirt, and you're listening to oldies. I've never met anybody like you." And when I met you, is like you are, as I mentioned in the intro, an aficionado, and you have encyclopedic knowledge, and you taught me so much about music, brought me so many bands from Brass City Records. Like, who the hell is this? Wait, this is great. I love this. Bands I never would have even heard of. All right, perfect example, and we can get into this. You're like, Rich, did you ever hear of a band named Slower? They play Slayer songs slow. No, but they sound great. So you're still
You
doing it.
did listen to it.
Yes, I love it. So I love the fact that you have so much knowledge of music, and you're right. Even me with this show, sometimes I get messages like, I was watching your show. You really inspired me to do this. You really made me feel better about this. You never know who's listening and the impression you made on them, and you're making impressions to people in Germany. So congratulations on that.
I appreciate the words and thank you for for continuing to I guess support that kind of scene. I had an idea you would enjoy that slower record.
I love it.
Um and I do have to say though, do you remember you record stores? You remember we used to go to New York City just to go record shopping?
Yes, yes, I do. I
So one
miss
of the
those
things
days. Well, I would say something
well,
really quick about that because I think kids are missing out on so much because I love the fact that we grew up in an age where you had to go to a store instead of like now you watch something or you listen to something. If you like this, you might like that. What we did back then was go to the record store and somebody say, "Oh, pick this album. If you like that, you're gonna love this," and they'd hand me an album. So you actually did it in person, talking to people, and you made new friends. Now everything's just done by, "Oh, let me click on this. They said that if it's similar to this, and let me check it out." I think they're missing out on so much. We had so much fun going to New York,
well
going to
one
New
of the
Haven.
one of my how do I could use to say the word mentor.
Yep.
One of my mentors and how I got such an interest and learned about so much music in different genres was the owner of Brass City Records, Walter. And he passed away sadly, I think 10 years ago this year.
Wow.
Um or next year. It's either 9 or 10 years. And I when he passed, I felt like I lost a father figure because I had learned so much from the guy. Um and that's the other thing too, going into record stores now and compared to how it is now, like going into record stores, Rich, I when I would go in them, I went in there to see what instead of what I found, what found me.
Hmm.
So I mean, it's like, oh wow, this looks pretty cool, and you take it home, listen to it, and then boom, voila, you just learned something new.
Hmm.
A good friend of mine years ago, his philosophy was, back when we had record stores. I mean, there's still a few around, but it's not like it used to be. His philosophy was that every record in a record store should have a blank white cover with no writing on it. And then
Hmm.
people go in and they just pick one and they take it home. They buy it, take it home and listen to it. Um, Now the internet, when you go shopping for music, if you're buying physical merchandise, CDs, LPs, cassettes, which you still can get, uh, you're looking for what you want to find. You know what you want. You want to buy the new Twisted Sister record or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, You're going on the website, and oh, there it is, boom, click. And, there's no browsing involved. I mean, unless you're going to look at the, click on a different letter, boom, boom. Whereas record stores, you're flipping through and you're actually seeing the artwork and you're picking it up and reading the back and holding it. It's physical media.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, the internet took away that nostalgic feeling of going into a record store and and meeting new people. A lot of my friends today were from meeting them at record stores or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, and so I remember Kevin Lewis, you mentioned, growing up with him, uh, he was always playing guitar. When I first met him, he was playing Who songs on his guitar, and he was in a band with my brother Larry called The Truth.
Great band.
And even though he was playing that music, whenever him and I and you and or if it was just him and I or uh he would be buying obscure music. He wasn't just into what he was playing. He's going to play the Who in his band and Zeppelin in his band, but he's buying uh King Crimson records, Robert Fripp, who we saw. I believe Kevin was with us that time.
Do you remember that
Um
story? Do you remember the story? How I actually was mentioned by Roger Catlin in the New Hartford Current?
yeah, yeah.
Well, let me explain to the people who are watching. 'Cause this it just popped up in a memory not too long ago that Kevin sent me on Facebook. What happened was Fripp from King Crimson said, "I don't want anybody talking. I want complete silence." And I said, "Really?" And the bouncer's like, "I know. I think it's stupid, but we have to." So during the whole concert, I'm in the back going, "Fripp, Fripp," and Roger Catlin, who used to be a critic for the Hartford Courant, maybe he still is, I don't know, but he said, "You had to love the guy at the back of the bar blissfully yelling out, 'Fripp!'" Yes.
um so and what got me to that level when I was growing up, the level of going into record stores and wanting to hear new things. When I was growing up, God, I was probably 9, 8, 9, or 10 years old. And I'm going to tell you, the first four records I got an LP and three 45s within, I think, a year of each other.
Hmm.
Of course, being that young, you had to rely on allowance money to buy records. So the first album I ever got was actually a K-Tel compilation. I think it was called Vintage Rock or Classic Rock. And I remember specifically because there were a couple songs on there that blew me away. Hush by Deep Purple
Love it.
and Edgar Winter Frankenstein.
Hmm.
Um, so that started my rock phase. Um, and we'll get to Doug in a minute, my next door neighbor, who was a big part of that as well.
Yeah.
Actually, no, we'll get to that now. I'll get to the other three records later. So learning about the classic hard rock. Of course, back then it wasn't classic; it was new. I mean, it was fairly new. So, and I grew up with two brothers. I was a middle child, and my older brother was into the classic rock, whereas the younger brother was as well. And we had this neighbor. His name was Doug, and he drove I can't remember what year it was, a black Mustang. And whenever he'd come home from work, he'd have the tunes blaring like Molly Hatchet or whatever.
Yeah.
And we knew he was home. We'd run out of our house and we'd run over and he would play records outside his bedroom window. His bedroom was the size of like a bathroom at the time. And we'd stand outside his bedroom window listening to Led Zeppelin and Ted Nugent and stuff like that. um, Shortly after that exposure, I got into Black Sabbath, and when I heard that riff to Iron Man, I was like, "Wow,
Yeah.
this is like a sound that is no other." And to this day, it stands as no other. Um, but here I'm talking about rock music and all. I'm one that gets bored easily. I need to be my brain needs to be stimulated with new things.
Yes. That's me.
Um, as much as I love listening to Black Sabbath, Ted Nugent, Pat Travers, Deep Purple, so slew of other classic rock bands, I liked hearing some of the obscure stuff too. Now the other three records that I got, all right, and they were commercial successes, but there's a reason I'm getting to this. The I can't remember the order I got them, but one was Whip It by Devo.
I love
One
that.
was Turning Japanese by the Vapors.
Yep.
And the third one was Cars by Gary Newman. Now I'm not, that was 78, 79. So I'm 9 or 10 years old. Now, as much as I love those songs, Rich, I like the B-sides better.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, as much as I love listening to Cars, when I flip that record over after wearing out the side one, here I'm a little kid, like in the that thing.
In the
And
car.
yeah, I listened to the B side, which was metal, and it completely blew me away. And I actually asked my parents to buy me that full album for Christmas, which I did get. And to me, it's still one of my favorite, The Pleasure Principle, one of my favorite records. Now, so now this is where you're going to learn a little bit something about why I am the way I am. So when I was in school that year, the music teacher would have a student bring in a record for the class to listen to. Like, all right, it's your turn to bring a record in, it's your turn, or whatever. And people would bring in like Journey, um, Van Halen. They would play like Wheel in the Sky and You Really Got Me and all the hits.
Yeah.
So my turn, I brought in that Gary Newman record, and the teacher went to put Cars on. I go, no, turn it over.
I
I
love
want the
it.
B side played. And Rich, that whole class hearing that was like this. They didn't know what to think of it. I didn't know if they liked it, hated it, or they were just. But that point, I it made me feel like, what, this is something that I really like doing. Is I want to teach new things to people, because
Mhm.
there's no way, in my belief, there's no way any kid in that class would have ever heard that song because they're listening to commercial radio or whatever. And they're expecting to hear Cars, and they're hearing a whole different riff,
Yep.
and boom. And the same thing with that Devo record. The flip side to that was Turn Around, and that song was just completely floored me. And that specific track got covered by Nirvana years later.
Hmm.
Um, so um, so with that in mind, I, one of the kids in my class a couple years later, and this is actually what changed my life. The like the turning point of what made my mind, like a switch went off, and like, wow, I there's so much out there. So here I'm listening to, that stuff, and I'm listening to Iron Maiden, and I like the new wave and the heavy metal stuff and whatever. And this one kid that sat next to me in class, his name was Jeff Paradise. I'll never forget him. Probably been about 40, probably 44 or 43 years since I've seen him, because this was like seventh or eighth grade. Um, he goes, oh, he goes, what kind of music you like? And I told him. He's, oh, I'm going to make you a tape. I'll bring it in for you. So side A was the Sex Pistols, Nevermind the Bullocks,
Hmm.
and side B was Dead Kennedy's Fresh Fruit for Rotting Vegetables, and with a filler of, I believe, Bob Marley and Killing Joke. And I heard these records, and I was just in awe. I was like, wow, this is something you don't hear.
Yep.
And the next day or 2 days later, I told him, I said, man, this stuff is great. And he goes like this to me, and he goes, if you like this, there's a college radio show on 89.3 WWH on Fridays from 3 to 4 called Sound and Fury. And the host, he went by the name Rob Banks. I don't know what his real name was, but Rob Banks, you know,
Yep.
obviously a DJ name. And this is, and I was like, okay, cool. And I would run home from school. School got out at 2:30. The show started at 3. I would run home from school, turn it on, and try to tune it in, because it was, so far low on the dial, and you had to mess with the antenna. And I listened to this show, and I would record them, and I learned so much about uh the punk rock scene, the hardcore scene, um and, like, bands like I already mentioned Dead Kennedys, but the UK Subs, the Subhumans,
Yep.
early Gangrene, um, Scratch Acid, local bands like the White Pigs and Chronic Disorder. I'm
Yep.
sure you remember those guys.
Oh yeah.
Um, and I actually, I got into it. And I started listening to a lot of that stuff. I'd record this guy's show. Now, mind you, I'm still not old enough to get a job where I can't buy records. So, couple, maybe a year or two after that, do you remember in, I want to say 1983, 84, our local radio stations, WHCN and WCCC?
Oh yeah.
I want to say,
What was
oh,
that?
go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I interned at WHCN and I worked at WCCC, so I'm
Okay.
affiliated with both stations. And I know them well.
All right. So, before then, because I don't think you're old enough when this happened, they might have had these shows. I don't remember. I don't know if it was Tuesday or Thursday nights, but they had a show called The Metal Shop.
Yeah, that was before my time.
Reason,
I know. I remember listening to it though.
right. Okay, so for some reason, both of those stations would air this program at the same time to compete with each other, which kind of sucked because you're listening to one station and then you're like, oh shit, I'm going to miss what's on the other station.
Yeah.
And at the time, you only had one radio and one tape deck to
Yeah.
record. So I would listen to this. I would listen to this every week, and and you'd hear the commercial stuff like Judas Priest and Motley Crue, and all the commercial bands. And one show, and I can't remember which station to give the credit to, played a song off of they announced it as Megaforce Records Metallica, and they played Hit the Lights. Now this is 1983
Wow.
on one of those stations, and I heard that. I'm like, oh my god, this is the sound. You've got your punk sound, you got your metal sound, like boom. And I believe within a week, I begged my father to drive me to Capitol Records in Hartford
Yep.
to look for this record, and sure enough, Kill Them All. And hearing that record from start to finish, it completely back then made that band my favorite band. And now we're talking, I'm 14, 15 years old.
Yeah. I have to
Um,
say for me, so
and
I want to stop you for 1 second because for me, the first three Metallica albums are the best. And I like Injustice for All, their fourth album. After that, I got a little bored with the Black Album. I know that's their commercial success, but I think the first three up to Master of Puppets was great, flawless. And I love, like you said, the first album, Hit the Lights, Four Horsemen, Seek and Destroy. There's so many great songs in that one album. Motor Breath. It's just that they came out kicking ass and had so many
well,
great songs.
we'll take a side trip to that uh, discussion, and we'll get back to the my I guess my starting to be a DJ thing.
Yeah.
I agree with you. The first three records were phenomenal. I mean, I think Ride the Lightning. I
Yes.
mean, if you pick one metal album in your whole life, that's the record to pick. Um, and I agree with you. After Ride the Lightning, then and Cliff passed away sadly. And Jason got in the band, and then they did Justice for All, and then the EP, or I don't know if they're the right order. Then they did the Black Album, then the Load and Reload, then the all the other ones after that until Jason left. Um, so and I got to give those guys credit. I respect the fact that what they have in their lives today, they've definitely earned. Um, Getting there, I don't know if they had any influence on being on a major label or any pressure to try to sell records. I don't know. I do know that the original version of Enter Sandman was supposed to be a song about crib death. And
Uh,
if I remember correctly, I don't remember where I saw this or read this. Bob Rock talked James into changing the lyrics. So James's lyrics were still, I guess you want to say, raw. Um, but then that got changed. And to me, I get it. If you want to get known and be famous, you're going to do what you're going to do. But when you take your own artistic creation and alter it for that, it kind of bums me out.
mhm.
Um, and I do respect them for where they, the hard work they've put in. Um, and the records after that were, they were okay. They made commercial. You hear Fuel on the radio, Enter Sandman on the radio, or whatever. Um, And then the ones when Rob joined the band, Saint Anger, I just couldn't understand that record at all.
Horrible.
I mean, there's not everyone. I don't need to talk about this, but everyone knows. Like my first thought was that one guitar solo from Kirk. I mean,
Yeah.
that was a bummer. The production of it was very poor. Um, and then they end up dropping Bob Rock. I don't think he did the one after that
I think
with Broken Scarred, Beaten Scarred or whatever. Uh, what's the name of that record? The
that one
Day
I
That
could.
Never Comes is on it.
Which one was it?
That's Magnetic. That's
Oh
it.
yeah, yeah. Actually, I stopped listening to him for a while, so I did forget like the newer albums after that. But I know I remember when they got rid
Um,
of Bob Rock. But what happened was when they got Rick Rubin back, or got Rick Rubin, he sort of brought them back to the beginning sound, and I think that they started to get a little bit better. But even then, I'm like, I've heard it before, so it's really nothing for me new. But I like, as a producer, I think Rick Rubin has worked. I mean, you know the history of him from Beastie Boys, Slayer, Metallica, Johnny Cash, Neil Diamond. He's worked with everybody, and he made Black Sabbath, their album 13 was the first time they ever won a Grammy, I think, because he said, "I want you to go back, listen to the first two albums, and come up with some new songs. Go back to your roots." And I love his style of like
um,
getting the
but
bands to
real
bring
quick,
up the best in them. Are you frozen? Yeah, I think it's frozen.
no, I got you. I see
Okay.
you drinking.
Oh, okay.
Real quick, uh, 72 seasons. I absolutely love. I got to admit.
Yeah.
There's some riffs on there that reminded me of, I mean, and you got to think of the production.
Yeah.
Like back in 1983 when they produced Kill 'Em All, they didn't have the budget to what they do now. So if you take the 72 seasons and go back to 1983 with those songs, a lot of those riffs could have been on Kill 'Em All.
Yeah.
And the Lux Eterna riff totally reminds me of the Kill 'Em All days. So, anyways, so I'm listening to Metallica as a kid or whatever, and um, listening to a lot of the thrash metal. During those times, that's when I met you.
Hmm.
Do you remember when we unofficially met?
Yes. Let me guess. It was a battle of the bands. My brother was playing. Hell awaits. I jumped on stage. All of a sudden, I saw you. I grabbed you, brought you up on stage.
And
We
we
did
were
some
we were
moshing.
headbanging or whatever.
Yeah.
Yep. And at the time, like we didn't even talk. We were just headbanging to your brother's band doing Hellawaits. And if I remember correctly, Sean Donnelly was in the band at the time.
Yes.
Yep. Sean
That's
Donnelly, bass player, singer for Plague, Sonic Plague.
yeah. And what happened was Sonic Plague played that battle as well, and from that battle, they said, "We want you as a singer." So he quit the band my brother was in with him and joined Sonic Plague from that show.
And if I remember, I remember Sonic Plague being. If I remember, wasn't Joe Inamorata in that band at the time?
Yes. Yep.
He was, and
And
and he
and then
played. Who did he play with after that?
CFI, my brother's
CFI.
band.
That's right. That
Yep.
was your brother's band. Okay, all right.
Yep.
And I went to school with Steve.
Yep.
Uh,
Deep Therial.
Steve Theriot was in the band. Um, so here I am. I'm buying metal records and thrash punk albums and whatever. I meet you, and then I meet a guy at a store in Bristol, Connecticut here, the music shop. His name
Love
was
that place.
Fred,
What's he up to?
and
Is he still in the business at all? I
I
know that
don't
place is
think
gone, but
so. I haven't heard from him, and I saw him at my father's memorial when my father passed, which
yeah.
was 21 years ago.
Oh my God.
I when Walter died, I was sending him emails back and forth, and I actually called Fred up, and he picks up the phone, and I'm like, "Hey, Fred, it's Tom," and then click. I'm like, try call him back, no answer. I emailed Fred. I just tried calling you. Never heard from him since.
Wow.
So
Okay.
I think he took Walter's passing very hard, and I don't think he wanted to talk about it or to talk to
Uh,
anybody because I mean he had worked for Walt for so many years and
yeah.
whatnot. But anyways, Fred. I would go to the music shop in Bristol and I would order all these records. I would go, hey, I want to. Can you order me Di Horse Bites Dog Cries? Can you order me Gangrene? And they they didn't. They were starting to phase out LPs. They were just strictly doing CDs and cassettes at one point. And so every time I go in there, Fred would give me the catalog. Here, just look through here. Tell me what you want. Like, oh, I'll take this Herax record and the Mentors or whatever. Order me these. And so they'd order them for me, and I go buy them. And eventually, the owner of the store, his name was Ron, um, said, "Hey, the stuff that you order, we're bringing it on cassette and it's selling. Do you want a job here?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." So they hired me to work Saturdays, and I did indie buying. Eventually, I worked there during the week, and
Hmm.
eventually I couldn't work there that much, but I still did the indie buying for him, which was cool. And if you remember when we went to New York, Rich, we went and visited Caroline Records.
Oh
You
yeah,
remember that?
I do.
And that my connection was the music shop because I was the buyer and they were one of my companies that I did business with. So while working there, Fred got me into band like the New York noise scene, like Sonic Youth and um, Lydia Lunch and the Contortions and bands like that. Um, and I started really focusing in on that kind of sound. So I still like listening to hard rock, metal, et cetera, et cetera. Now I know earlier we are talking about classical. I'm getting there.
Yep.
There's and so I started listening to a lot of the New York scene stuff. Um, so going to shows with a friend of ours, Scott, we would go see bands like that. We went and saw Sonic Youth and
Hmm.
um, The Unsane a couple times at the Moon in New Haven. We would go. You remember that place, right? The
Oh
Moon in
yeah,
New
the
Haven.
moon. Yeah, I
Yep,
remember the moon. Do you remember before that? Because I know I wasn't sure if this was before I met you. Did you ever go to the Anthrax in Norwalk? That
I
was
did.
okay. That's what I thought. I loved that place because back then there was. I mean, they went from the ska bands. Oh yeah, I remember we saw some ska bands there, and we saw a bunch of
New
punk
York
bands there.
citizens.
Yes, but I forgot about that. Then Murphy's Law was there all the time. Black Flag
Well,
played there. Henry Rollins.
we talked about the first the first time me and you unofficially met. The first time we officially met, I was working at the music shop,
Yeah.
and Murphy's Law Back with the Bong came out, and
Yep.
you were with Scott when he bought that tape. And I think not too long after that, me, you, Scott, and I don't remember if there was a fourth one of us. We went and saw Murphy's Law. So I remember going there. I know I saw Murphy's Law with you there. I
Yes.
saw uh, uh, you just mentioned New York Citizens.
Yep.
Corrosion of Conformity we saw there too.
Oh yeah, the great
Because I
band.
remember, yeah, I remember you yelling, "Holier!"
Yep. And the crumb. Were you there for the Crumb Suckers when the guy almost died, and they
No,
stopped
I
the
missed that
show?
one.
Yeah, they stopped the show, and the kid like he did his stage dive, and I think his body went one way, his neck went the other way. Oh. So that, but yeah, there was I miss places like that. I mean, the Moon was great, the Anthrax was great, and then the Brick and Wood where my band used to play all the time. I love those places, and then there was a couple other places too. You know what's funny? One more thing about the Moon. I remember Scott said, "Rich, do you want to go see this band?" As who was playing? It was 1989. He goes, "Some band named Nirvana." I said, "Nah, I'm not really interested." 2 years later, I said, "Wait, isn't that the band that was playing at the Moon?" It was Nirvana.
It's funny you mention that because I got Scott into Nirvana when Bleach first came out, and they were on Sub Pop, and we were driving to a Naked City gig, which I'm going to get to Naked City later. Uh, we're in the car, dude. You got to hear this new band, and and I put the tape in, and we listened, and he absolutely loved it. Now they weren't that big. I mean, at that point, um, so it's kind of funny because when I remember that because I went to that, me and him went to that show, and it was 2 days after Nevermind came out,
Hmm.
and and you know how small the Moon was.
Oh
It was
yeah.
very small. So 2 days after that record came out, they're playing the Moon. About 2 weeks after that, you couldn't touch them. They were already opening up for bands in coliseums. So that period of when that record came out to two
Wow.
or 3 weeks later, that was a small window to see them in a dive bar or a club or whatever.
Yeah.
And I didn't I couldn't I thought you went to that with us, but now that you're talking about it, I don't think you were there.
No, I was invited. I remember Scott asking me about that. Yeah, do you want to go see Nirvana? I'm like, nah, I forgot. I don't know why I didn't go, but I remember afterwards going, why the
There's
hell didn't I go?
there's actually somebody filmed that and put it on YouTube.
I gotta check that out. That's funny.
Yep. Um, so anyways, so getting back to Fred got me into all this music, the downtown scene.
Hmm.
And I was a Napalm Death fan too.
Yeah.
So for my 21st birthday, Fred had made me a tape. And here's a tape thing again. First the Kid with the Sex Pistols, then Kennedys. Now I'm getting another tape. This is by a band called Naked City.
Hmm.
Naked City is John Zorn on alto sax, Fred Frith on bass, Joey Barron on drums, Bill Frisell on guitar, and Wayne Horowitz on keyboard. Wow, I did that from memory. And and I didn't know much about this band. Fred's, listen to it. You're gonna love it. And I took it home and I listened to it. And the first notes of the opening track, they do a version of the Batman theme, which is not what you think you hear the Batman. You're listening to it and you don't hear but it was their interpretation of it.
Yeah.
But then I'm listening, and all of a sudden it started getting like really fast and like, oh, this is like Napalm Death jazz style. And I'm listening to the record, and he did some Henry Mancini covers and Ennio Morricone covers on it, and the record just blew me away. You had this jazz thing mixing in metal, rock, surf, classical, all these different genres into this one group. And this is how I learned about jazz music. So I'm 21. I'm listening. And this is great. I love the way this guy plays bass. Let me see what other records he's done. And Fred Frith, the bass player, and I start buying. Go to Brass City Records. Oh, here's a Fred Frith record. Take it home. Boom.
Yep.
Oh wow, this is great. Who's playing this? They look at the drummer so. And this is what I'll tell everybody, because I have people ask me, how do you know so much about jazz music? How did you get into it or whatever? It only takes one record.
Hmm.
And depending on who the players are on that record, if you like that record, those other musicians are on other records. And
Yep.
that's what one of the things I love about jazz. When I started listening to Mingus, I learned about all these other drummers, all these other saxophone players or whatever. Um, and it's sort of like almost like a family tree. You take this one jazz record, and if Charlie Hayden's on bass, then it's like, wow, he's actually on a record with Aaron Shreve, who played drums with Santana.
Yeah.
And it's just the possibilities are endless. And if you find that certain thing that you like, I tell people, check out the other musicians. Now, I wouldn't do that with jazz music like Kenny G or Candy Dulfer or any of those commercial pop jazz artists. Nothing against them, but um, to me, that's not jazz music. That's for people who like to listen to jazz music in the background, whereas
Yeah.
I like listening to it in the foreground.
Mhm.
Excuse me. So that's where I started to learn about jazz, which also trickled into classical, because the jazz instruments, a lot of them are in the classical music as well. Um,
Mhm.
so shortly after that, I'm in Brass City Records, and Fred comes up to me and goes, "Hey, I gave this guy your phone number," and he hands me this piece of paper, and the name on it was his name was Brett Sokol, and there was a phone number on it, and I'm like, "Who is this guy?" Oh, he's the music director at WESU.
Mhm.
He's looking for DJs, and I told him he was asking if I knew anybody, and I gave him your name, and I said, okay. So I called him up, nice guy, and he's like, hey, come on down, and I went down there. He trained me, and within 2 weeks, I was on the air with ARG. I did a summer. My first show was during the summers from I want to say 10 to midnight. Um, and they actually had a rule. You had to play 5 new releases an hour, but it was obscure stuff. It wasn't like,
Yeah.
you have to play the new AC/DC album. No, you could play the new Jesus Lizard record or the new
I love it.
Big Black record or whatever, or the new Slint record. And I started out with, I was doing like a new wave rock, and I would mix in the noise and the obscure jazz. It was a variety show, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I would get positive and negative feedback from listeners, which to me, any feedback, whether it's positive or negative, you've affected that one person, Rich.
No, I want to
And
say
that
that. I
was the
want to stop.
goal.
I say this all the time because, as you know, I've done stand-up comedy, and I used to say one of the worst things. I don't care if people love me. I don't care if people hate me. The worst thing it could be like, hey, so what'd you think of Rich? Which one was that? Like, no opinion at all. I could care. Like I'll tell you the joke off the air, but one of the jokes that I did, I got booed at, and that was my favorite time doing comedy. It was the best. Like then like when they went to go introduce me again, saying thanks to Rich, they booed me again. It was the funniest thing in the world. I loved it. But then I did the same joke. And this was in Springfield, Mass. Did the same joke in Sullyton. They were over there laughing, like slamming their hand on the table. So you could do the same set 4 different places and get 4 different reactions. But just like you, I could give a shit less if they like me or if they hate me, as long as I got a reaction.
And that's the thing. It's like if you're that you don't like the material or the music or whatever, there's other options. You can switch to radio. You can go to
Yep.
a different club. You can, do something else. But for me, like I said, whether it's bad, negative or positive, bad or good feedback, it's you've affected that one person.
Yep.
And like I was telling you, that was one of my goals doing in radio. Uh
Well,
I
I have to
think
say, I
for
loved your show. I listened to it, and I had the honor of not only once, I think 2 or 3 times being a guest on your show. It was so much
you
fun.
were you were I the last one you were doing the comedy.
Yeah.
This I think actually you were down there at the old radio station when it was in Clark Hall.
Yes.
So I do remember that you did come down for a show. Um, I just wanted one story about so I'm DJing and I think the worst feedback I ever got was somebody had called and requested the immigrant song. Did I ever tell you the story?
No, I want to hear this
All
though.
right, so I'm going to tell it again whether you heard it or not. So and once again, I'm doing college radio because I want to play stuff you're not going to hear anywhere else. I'm gonna play music that's that is new to everybody. You know,
Hmm.
so I'm not on the air to play, the same Aerosmith, Skinner, the same classic rock songs you're going to hear somewhere else. Um, and I'm pretty sure when I would get calls like that they weren't listening to the correct radio station, but this specific guy was. So I got a call request for the immigrant song. Now I didn't know the guy was local in Middletown.
Uh,
If I did that, I would have done something differently. So he calls up and he requests the immigrant song, and I'm like, all right, whatever. I hang the phone up. I don't play it, you
mhm.
know. Calls again. Hey, I'm still waiting to hear the immigrant song. I'm like, okay. So I'm like, all right, I really don't want to play this because it's you can hear it on the commercial stations, but how can I satisfy this listener and still keep to my roots or whatever you want to call it. Uh, so I spun the record and I played it at the wrong speed purposely. I believe I played it at 45. So
I
you
love
heard, Robert Plant screaming like chipmunk style.
it.
So and nobody called me up to say, hey, you're playing this at the wrong speed or, you know. So I don't know if anybody probably thought that if they heard it or they didn't care or nobody was listening. One of the three. Well, this guy was listening, so I did that and I play it. About 20, 25 minutes later, somebody's kicking at the radio station window trying
Oh.
to break in.
Oh
And it was
man.
that guy. He got a little bit upset that I didn't play the immigrant song for him at the correct speed.
Wow.
So yeah, and I
He
think
takes his
about doing
Zeppelin
that. And I
seriously,
was
huh?
young, and I probably should have just played the record, but I was a snob.
Yeah.
I mean, I went through that period back then, and it was like, no, nobody's going to tell me to play classic rock on my station. And then, I look back at it and think about, what, I probably should have just played it. Um, but I like I've said earlier, I've gotten a lot of positive feedback, from yourself and a lot of listeners, and this one guy named Pete who was from Meriden would call me every week. Hey man, can you play Fate's Warning or can you play Trouble? He was into the 80s metal, and if I wasn't
Yeah.
playing metal, he'd still request, and I'd spin it. He requested Venom one time, I think, and I played Seven Gates of Hell or something. And every week he would call up with something different. Rich, you could set your watch to this guy, and his name was Pete from Meriden. Even when we'd have the pledge drives, he would call up and pledge on my show. Hey, play this, and I'll pledge you $50 or whatever.
Wow.
Anyways, so uh, I don't DJ anymore. I stopped in 2015 due to work.
Uh,
It's hard for me to commit to the time because I was working a lot of hours and I got a big promotion and whatnot. And maybe 3 or 4 years into, no, sooner than that, 2 or 3 years into my new gig, I'm working at my place of work, and this guy walks in wearing a WESU t-shirt, and I look at him and I go, "Hey," I go, "You listen to that station still?" He goes, "Oh yeah," and I go, "I used to do a show there." And he goes, "What show?" I go, "Arg." He's like, "You're Tom?" I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "I'm Pete from Meriden." I'm like,
That's
"Oh, hey, nice
funny.
to finally put a face to the thing." You know what he says to me after that? "I pictured you with long hair." Sorry.
Sorry to disappoint you, but that's funny. I used to have some listeners like that. I never had a listener. Well, actually, in one of the stations I worked at, this guy, I see him walking up to the studio. I don't know who it was with a shotgun. I'm like, so I'm on near.
Oh boy.
I think I'm gonna be dead soon. Just want to say goodbye. And this is American Pie. I was working at an oldie station, WWCO, your hometown favorite. But I walk. The guy's like, I listen to you all the time. I just wanted to show you my new gun. I was like, oh my. So yeah, you never know what could happen to these stations. And just like you at WESU, you're basically alone at the station the hours unless you're working them like at a major FM station, and there's which is different now because now they record their shows beforehand, so nobody's there at all. But yeah, you're usually alone, so anybody can walk in. You don't know what they're gonna do to you. But I definitely had my share of either detractors or people that love me, and either way, the bottom line I always said, as long as I'm having a good time, I really don't care. And I know with you, you always had a great time doing a show. And how many years did you actually do your show?
So I started in '91, and 2010 or 11, I had a couple year hiatus.
Yeah.
Then I went back in 2004 or 2005, and I stopped again in 2015. So I was on and off for what, 16, 17 years or something like that. Um, and you're right. It was the whole point of it is, having fun doing it.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I love, not only, being the DJ, I like to learn there too. And there were other DJs there that had their own style show or their own genre. And I remember sitting in a board meeting, and there's this guy who does a Grateful Dead show there. His name's John. And and my first thought is, he's into the jam band scene and Grateful Dead and or whatever. And his whole show is 2 hours of Grateful Dead music. And he comes up to me, or he's sitting next to me. He looks over. He goes, "Hey, I was listening to your show the other night." I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Yeah." And he goes like this: "You ever listen to the Swans?" I go, "Of course." And it completely floored me that he was talking about a New York noise band from the '80s and early '90s, and you get to talk with these people, and there's a lot. It just, I guess where I'm going is, you don't judge a person by how they look or whatever.
Yeah.
Judge a book by its cover, because you never know what people have been exposed to musically or artistically with film as well. Um, and and then I would learn from these other people, um, you know, different styles or different artists or bands or whatever. So while I was there doing my show, I was actually learning myself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, One time I did a show where I just went and there was thousands of records in the library. I don't know if you remember when you went.
I do.
Um, uh, the first time there was more though. When I interviewed you there with the at the other above the bookstore, when the last time you were there with me,
Yep.
the records weren't as many, but there were still some. But when they were in Clark Hall back in the '90s, there were thousands of them. I actually did a show once where I went into the library and I didn't even look. I just started picking records
Yeah.
off the shelf, not even looking at them, and then hook, there's my show for tonight. And to be honest with you, Rich, I couldn't tell you one artist that I played that night. I don't remember, you know. But and that was cool because I got to do this variety show, and not only am I doing it to expose the listeners to different music, I was exposing myself to it as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I always like once again. the main goal is you have fun doing it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I was always
that
told
was
at
the
Connecticut School of Broadcasting, they said, you don't have to be funny. As long as you're having fun, it's going to translate through the airwaves to the audience. And then when you're having fun, they're going to have fun as well. And I agree with that too. So I would just, they could tell, like, you're so full of energy, you're so much fun. And I wasn't making jokes, but it was just like on the air, and I loved what I was doing. And I would be like you with the oldie stuff. I had a lot of knowledge of the bands, and I would give different tidbits and just have fun and have like different people call in and answer the questions and try to make it more interactive than like this next song is Don McLean with American Pie. 1240s. I would just say this happened because of this, and Buddy Holly. It was so much fun, and that's why I'm so glad that similar to you. Well, for me, it's a little bit different. I got out of radio because I wasn't making any money, and I needed to get a real job. So I did other things, but I'm so glad that everything has come full circle, and I'm doing this now because I am having the time of my life. I'm not trying to make it. I'm just having the best time, and I'm meeting so many interesting people, having great people on the show like you, and just like you said, you learned a lot of stuff from other people. I learned a lot of stuff from the guests I have. Even like as I mentioned, I've known you for 35 years. I've learned and was exposed to so many bands I might have not have heard of until maybe a long time later if it wasn't for you.
Well, I appreciate that. I know I'm flattered and I'm glad that I could have that effect on you and hopefully in the future others as well. I do want to say before we wrap things up tonight, one of the reasons I don't do radio anymore is because it got to a point to where I wasn't enjoying it because I felt that there wasn't anything going on outside of the radio station anymore. I felt like I was in a box just listening to music because it got to a point to where I wasn't getting any feedback or any phone calls
Hmm.
and it's just like and I think a lot of that has to do with that you can listen to basically any radio station now on the internet. I mean, you can listen
Yeah.
to and 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 if somebody's doing something that they'd rather listen to, that's fine. But to me, it was if I felt I had exhausted my time there. Um, so it doesn't take the love of teaching people or having discussions to explore people's minds to learn and teach at the same time. And one of the things I was talking to you about the other day uh, was at some point I'd like to make a how do I word it? A group,
Music appreciation.
uh, what's that?
You said
Yeah,
music
music
appreciation.
appreciation. Yeah, music appreciation class or group. Um, which what I would my vision is to like have a room of people, sort of like a book club. When people read a book, they sit down and they discuss it. Um, Not necessarily along the same lines of, oh, go home and listen to the record. Let's discuss it. Hey, I'm going to talk about this today, and I'm going to talk about what I hear. I'd like to know what you hear, and then let's discuss different ways people hear the certain piece or whatever, and then open it up to to other people in the room to be like, hey, I'd like to bring this piece in and share with the group or whatever. Sort of, like sort of a community thing. I'm not looking to make money off of this. Um, and also talking with you, I think it would be really a cool idea to involve you with your knowledge of film and have
Hmm.
it like a combination to where people can get the best of two worlds instead of one. So that's something I'm in the process of trying to organize and create. Um, so an idea I've had for a few months. I've actually talked with some. I don't want to say they're professors. I don't think they're professors. I'm like teachers at schools
Yep.
about if their school has a music appreciation class, um, and I haven't gotten anywhere with that yet. I think the issue is I don't think the schools are looking to bring on extra or newer classes or
Uh,
whatever. Part of which I felt is that with the economy and people, with the money going up, that they don't want to spend, hire another teacher, have another subject, and pay all this money. And I don't know if that's it. I think part of me feels that way because the people I've talked to, I'm not bragging or anything, but I've knocked their socks off with what I talk about. And one guy I know who had a music appreciation class in school, he was telling me the teacher would play like, new wave music and, just regular songs that he's heard on the radio. And I thought to myself, there's so much more out there. You know, you it's so much more out there that you can listen to, but you got to have the determination and the
Mhm.
patience for it. You
Yes.
just can't you just can't sit back and be like click a button and be like, oh yeah, this is yeah, I don't want to listen anymore. I don't want to learn anything. But if you have that the desire to expand your knowledge, and you know this with film, Rich,
Yep. Exactly.
there's so with all the apps you can watch on your TV, you can basically find anything these days. Um, but
Mhm.
with the music part of it, um, oh, I totally forgot where I was going with this.
Well, I think that
um,
I just want to say I love that idea. I love that concept. I want to be a part of that. I think we can make this work, and I think that there's so many people that as soon as they find out about it would also love to be a part of it. So we'll talk off the air. We'll figure out if you don't get anywhere with the people you're talking to. I'm going to see if I can find a spot because I personally don't even care about getting money. I would love to do it just for fun and just learn the experience and just meet new people, make new friends. Like sort of like what we talked about going to the record stores. We'd go there
yeah.
and say, "Oh, you like this? You got to check this out." And I still have friends. I still talk to the professor. He's the owner of Brass City
Oh,
Records. No,
really?
sorry, not Brass City, Phoenix Records. Yeah, I still see him on a somewhat regular basis. The guy is still hilarious, and I've known him since maybe 84, 85 when it was Cheapskate Records. So yeah, I love this
It's
idea.
40 years, my friend.
Yes, it's been a long time, a long time. So I think that you and I will get this off the ground, and there's going to be a lot of people that are going
Well,
to want to be a part of it.
and I think you hit the nail on the head with that. I think what we were talking about earlier, how it took away, like the internet has taken away the nostalgic value of going to look at records and record stores.
Yes.
I mean, back then, that's what we did for fun. I mean, we would play sports on the street. We didn't have video games. We'd go to buy records and I don't know, you weren't in the same neighborhood as me, but when we were kids, we'd go to our friend's house. Hey, what record you get? Hey, I got this. Hey, listen to this. Hey, can I borrow this? Hey, can I borrow that?
Oh yeah.
Now it's like, yeah, hey, let me get out my phone. Boop, 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 I'm gonna send it to you. And as much as that bothers me, I do have to commend something about that. The internet has paved the way for so many artists that you wouldn't hear about.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
and that is what has put my brain on overload the last 5, 6, 7 years, because you remember back in the day, we'd be buying magazines to learn, hey,
Yes.
look, a record review, this guy or that guy. And it's like you don't hear about all the other bands. And I was talking to you the other day about a website called Bandcamp.
Yes.
And that website has turned me on to so much music that I can't even handle it sometimes. Um, and it's an incredible website. Anyone who wants to learn and hear new music, just I like it, but I don't know how iTunes works, but this one to me is more user friendly. But it's also not going to have a lot of popular music. It's going to be basically, a lot of starving artists, a lot of starving labels. You will get, bigger labels putting their music on there. But what I like about it, Rich, is that if you were still in a band and you guys wanted people to hear your demo, you could just upload it to this website, and people can just, snap of the fingers, download it and listen to it, or they could stream it like that. And you could tag other, genres and other artists that might be similar or comparable. So I do have to say, as much as the internet killed the nostalgic value, it's given the world a bigger platter of things to choose from.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
I
and
want
I'll
to
give you an
expand upon
oh,
that. Sorry to interrupt you. I want to expand upon that because I had this kind of what was my mind went blank. What's the first streaming where the people Metallica Lars Ulrich was fighting because they were stealing from them?
okay. So
Which one
it
was
was
that?
called Napster.
Yeah, Napster. All right, so Napster, and I have this conversation with people, and we don't have Napster anymore. Obviously, there's so many other streaming services. Bands aren't making money from that, but and maybe for the big bands that were making money in the beginning, like Metallica, they're losing a lot more money. But for bands that are up and coming, like the bands you were mentioning, they're going to be exposed to people that would never even give them a chance because I'm not going to waste money on this. But then what I do is I listen to the band, and then when they're in the area, I'm saying I'm going to check this band out, and then I'm going to buy merchandise. So they're making money from me eventually. But I never would have heard of them if it wasn't for these streaming services because I would think I don't know if I feel like wasting $15 on this, but oh wow, this sounds great, and then I can download it and then and I know that there's other sites where you'll make more money. The band will make the 100% whatever 100% profit. Then if Spotify and iTunes, they make 3 4 cents per song, I think, or per download. It's not that much.
Oh, well, one of the things that bothered me about the whole thing with Metallica and their lawsuit, with Napster.
Hmm.
I mean, I get it. I get why they did it. You know, I understand it, and I'm not knocking them for that. Where I'm gonna knock them at is that Napster was just a digital way of tape trading, and Metallica got huge signed to Megaforce Records. How? By tape trading. All the
Yes.
kids in California going to their shows were tape trading this, tape trading that, tape trading this, and so in a way, they're sort of being hypocritical.
Yeah.
I get it. Napster, it's boom, it's a click of the button and you got it in seconds. Whereas tape trading, you gotta dupe the tape and mail it or whatever. But it's the same exact principle. Now, a lot of artists, even some that are got famous, will tell you that they don't care if their music's downloaded for free. They want you to go to the shows
Yes.
because that's where they make the money. Um, and there's also artists that don't care because, like we were saying, nobody knows who they are. I'll give you a great example. The band Sunna. I don't know if they have the O with the parentheses after.
I've heard of
It's
them. I don't think I've ever heard them, but I
okay.
heard of them.
It's Greg Anderson. He was in a band called Goat Snake and a bunch of other side projects, and Steve O'Malley, uh, another guy who had a bunch of side projects too. Uh, uh, Thor's Hammer was one of them, and anyways, it's a guitar duo drone thing. And back when they first started, I don't think I would have ever heard of them if it wasn't for the file sharing
Hmm.
programs, because they started coming out after the record store started to fizzle out. So I couldn't go into a record store and have the Sono record find me. How did I find it? Well, it was recommended to me by somebody in a chat room. Here, download this. You'll like this. And I download it. And you know what? When I downloaded it, I've seen them 3 times, 2 times or 3 times, 2 times, and I've bought all the records.
Yep.
So they got money from me. Now I'm just one person, based on the fact that I was able to hear them through a file sharing program.
Yeah.
And like I was saying about Bandcamp, the platter is just endless for what kind of music or brand or artist to hear or download or listen to, and here it is new or not. And the other thing I like about it too is when you like, let's say you had an accountant on this website, and I have one. Let's say you buy a record by, let's say, I don't know, let's say Sleep.
Hmm.
um, It'll show up in my feed that you bought that record. And I'm like, oh, look what Rich bought. Let me check it out. Boom. Hey, I like this too. I'm going to buy it too. Boom.
Yeah.
So it sort of expands on that thing. Like, I'm going to use this term again, like I do with jazz music, a family tree, where you got certain people that'll buy certain records. And then if they buy something that you don't know, like, oh, I'm going to check it out. And once again, you have to have the ambition to do this, because you're not going to be able to do this in 5 minutes. You really have to get your mouse and click, 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 and click this link, click that link, and really have to sample a bunch of stuff. But once you find that hole to go through the tunnel to learn about the stuff that you're interested in and to hear more about it. It's awesome.
Yeah.
I can't I can't say enough about it on how much it's changed me as far as learning and knowing much music. You and I haven't talked much in the last, I don't know, 10 years, but back when we did, you thought I was knowledgeable back then. You got to hear it now.
Well, you know what?
I
I
mean,
love.
I can't even remember half the shit. That's how much there is.
Well, that's why I think this is a good idea. I love having you on the show. And you mentioned I've known you for 35 years, but I haven't talked to you a lot in the last 10 years or so. But I love talking music. I love talking movies. I would love to have you as a regular guest. Maybe once a month we'll come on and we'll just talk about like what we're talking about now. I mean, we know you have tons of experience. We have like a plethora of knowledge. So I'd love to have you come on anytime you want to. And we'll just talk music, movies, and whatever else that's on your mind.
Absolutely. And so at some point, let's discuss
Yeah.
this group of appreciation, music and film, and we could maybe try to get that together. Maybe you could put that in your comments or something on the thing, and like, anyone locally interested in doing this, let us know, and we'll try to find a spot and make it happen. Because I like you were saying, I mean, there's the nostalgic value of going to stores and meeting people that's gone. You
Yes.
don't, so I think it'd be cool to like locally do this. And and the other thing, Rich, too, the next time we do this, I want to try to learn from you, like films and stuff. And I'm going to go back to the beginning when I was talking about the Mandy soundtrack.
Oh
Have
yeah.
you haven't seen that, have you?
I have not.
Okay, when you watch it, because now you got to, because I talked about it.
Yes.
You got to focus on the soundtrack. It's amazing. Actually, I should say the score. The movie starts out with a King Crimson tune.
My
It's
God.
not in the score though, which is really cool. And then when you hear the score, they fit it really well with it. Now Nicolas Cage is in it. I'm
Yes.
assuming, yeah. So you know about the movie, you
I
just
know
haven't.
about the movie. I never
Um,
saw it, and since I never saw it, I don't even know what the soundtrack. But I never knew King Crimson was a part of that. That's great.
I I'll be honest with you, I don't even know if the movie to me was really that amazing, but what made it amazing was the music.
Yep.
So,
It's
but
similar
all
to
right,
what?
cool. So listen,
Oh, now you know you have to
we'll
go.
talk again.
Yeah, one last thing I was gonna say, similar to
Oh,
Repo Man
sure.
with Emilio Estevez. The movie was average. Actually, no, I like the movie, so that's maybe a bad example. But the soundtrack is phenomenal. All these punk bands. It's just the soundtrack made the movie, and actually, it's because that was more of the soundtrack than the score. But just like you, I love soundtracks. I love scores. I love learning about new music, and I love having you on the show at least once a month. How's that?
I love it. And another point which I'm not going to get into. I was going to mention the Clockwork Orange, but Rich, we're going to go on all night if we keep doing this. We're going to go back and forth.
This will be like another 5 hour
So
interview.
I think we got enough material for the next 10 years,
Yes,
or maybe
we
even
haven't
more.
talked in
So
10 years, but we have 10 years of conversation to talk about and catch up. So definitely, Tom, it was
all
great
right,
having you on
brother.
the show. And once again, you're welcome back anytime. You have carte blanche on this show.
All right, and I want to say to any of your viewers, thanks for watching, and hopefully, you anyone watching will have taken something away from this or have an interest in what we're talking about and to tune in again in the future.
And then join our music appreciation group coming soon. Right at you.
All
That
right, my
wraps.
man. We'll see you.
Oh yeah, most definitely. That wraps up the latest episode of the Claws Corner. A huge thanks goes out to music aficionado and radio host Tom Gatzen for taking time out of his extremely busy schedule to be a guest on my show. He will be back. A huge thanks also goes out to editor extraordinaire John Bristol of the award-winning Elmwood Productions for always doing a superb job editing the show each and every week and making it available to all on YouTube. I am also extremely grateful to Joseph Timothy Quirk and Rob Bolt for all they do to make my show available in several Connecticut radio stations as well as Spotify, iTunes, Amazon Music, Audible, and iHeartRadio. I also need to thank Al Coles for airing the show on a local cable station in Connecticut to help me expand my audience. And lastly, but definitely not least, I need to thank you, the viewer, for always tuning in. Enjoy your day, everyone.